The greatest single socio-political power shift in the world has just occurred, and Washington, D.C. is doing everything to keep anyone from noticing it or talking about it. If you think they used social media to suppress information before, just wait. Not in 77 years have we seen what has just occurred. If you want the details of this, stay tuned. You are definitely going to want to see this. Also, over at the Patreon channel, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of what happened on Monday Night Football. Well, we caught something that nobody's talking about, and nobody is revealing. If you'd like to see the details of this, of course, because it's controversial, we have to talk about it over at Patreon. Would love to have you over there. It is only $1 US, one per month. That's it. Lowest allowable level, even less if you sign up for an entire year. We can take the gloves off. We can talk about things like that, where they are suppressing information and they're using social media to keep you distracted with nonsense like Kevin McCarthy. There are stories out there that are making a huge difference in the world, and nobody is talking about them. The Patreon channel that we have is dedicated to military-level psychological operations. Operations to convey selected information and indicators to audiences to influence their emotions, motives, and objective reasoning, and ultimately the behavior of governments, organizations, groups, and individuals, without those governments, organizations, groups, individuals knowing that it's happening. This is what's going on right now. The key to any good psychological operation is you have to have the target not be aware you're doing it, and that's exactly what's happening right now. So just like on the story with Monday Night Football, what's going on right now in the world, the real story, nobody's talking about. Washington, D.C. has just failed. For the first time since World War II, on a global stage, the powers that be that flip governments and take over the reins of power from smaller, weaker countries, they have just failed in an epic way on the global stage, and nobody is talking about it. In fact, some of the articles are showing 0 views that have been up for weeks, which is virtually impossible on the internet. Huge story. U.S. no longer recognizes Guaido as Venezuela's president. Biden official confirms. This is from Axios World. The U.S. is following the lead of Venezuela's opposition lawmakers and no longer considering Juan Guaido, random guy named Juan, as the country's legitimate leader after the opposition-controlled National Assembly voted to dissolve the interim government. See, it's not that they're not recognizing him. The interim government itself has been dissolved, the one set up by Washington, D.C. It's literally been made of none effect. And now the rest of the world has no choice but to recognize the actual leader of Venezuela. And believe me, that's going to come with consequences. Disputed Venezuelan gold worth $1.8 billion in Bank of England vaults remains uncertain after dissolution of interim government. You see, these courts are going to have no other out. They're going to have no basis to rule that gold belongs to anybody but the Nicolas Maduro government. And the gold will be repatriated. But it's not just that $1.8 billion. That's 31 tons there. But when you read down through this article, they tell you the real story. It's way more than that. It's more like 40. Here it is. However, this structure is new and doesn't figure in any of the 52 trials all over the world where there is more than 40 billion in dispute between the two governments. But you see, there are no longer two governments. There's only one. This is huge. And here's the crazy part. You ready for this? Chevron to send first Venezuelan crude cargo to Mississippi refinery under U.S. license. They're already on the way. That thick, heavy crude that all of our refineries had been set up for so many years are already receiving Venezuelan oil. That's how bad the defeat was. Nicolas Maduro is the leader of Venezuela, whether we like it or not, whether you like him or not. Juan Guaido never was elected to anything. He only was the leader of the Popular Will Party. And even then, he only won it with 26% of the vote. Now do you see who is really in charge? Who is really pulling the strings? See, it didn't matter. This goes all the way back. This is a bipartisan thing. Anybody out there think I'm picking on Biden or Trump or anybody? This goes all the way back to Obama. This goes all the way back to the last 2 years of the Obama administration, when he lifted the ban on U.S. oil sales abroad. There used to be a ban, 1975 to 2015. U.S. oil companies, when they pumped oil here in the United States, it had to be sold here in the United States, refined and sold here. There was a law. U.S. oil for U.S. interests only. Well, guess what? In exchange for a bunch of green concessions, that oil export ban got lifted. And so the U.S. started pumping a ton of oil and bragging about, oh, look at how much oil we have and how much we're pumping out of the ground. Everybody assumed that would benefit America. But they were selling the oil abroad, while at the same time they were setting records for how much oil we were exporting. We were also setting records for how much oil we were importing. And if the Venezuelans get on the same sheet of music with the Brazilians and the Colombians, this could be a power shift like we've not seen in many lifetimes. Because there's enough oil down there that we could tell, if we would play our cards correctly, we could tell the Middle East to go take a flying leap. And have nothing to do with anything going on over there. Not the Saudis, not the Israelis, no one. And get all of our oil here in the Western Hemisphere. I think it was 3, maybe 4 years ago, this channel was the only channel that came out and said this. And said, this is going to fail, and this is going to fail in an epic way. And they tried, and they tried, and they tried, and they tried, and they failed, and they failed. And now there are literally tankers on the way from Venezuela with oil to Mississippi refineries. And nobody is talking about it. What happened to the starvation? What happened to all the starving people? And people selling kids, all this other stuff. What happened to all that? U.S. to receive first crude oil from Venezuela in 4 years. I mean, it's stunning. It is absolutely one of the most stunning things. And look, it's something that you wouldn't necessarily know unless you had some type of specific training or had spent any amount of time in Central and South America. People talk about the left and the right wing in North America. It's a very different thing now. It's a very, very different thing than in South America. In South America, when you say you're part of the right wing down there, that means you're for the big Catholic Church being in charge of things. You are for big business. You're for Steve Jobs. You're for Elon Musk. You're for all the big guys that are controlling things behind the scenes. You're for big government. Down in South America and Central America, Latin America, you would have enjoyed the idea of Washington, D.C. putting Governor DeSantis back in his place and coming in and stepping in with federal authorities and controlling everything. That is what the right wing stands for in Central and South America. The left wing, which everybody thinks is so evil and terrible and horrible, and they love to point fingers and blame all this, that, and the other on, they're the ones that stand for the people. And that's why they have just won in Brazil, in Mexico, now in Venezuela, in Colombia, in Peru. They just got rid of the president there. There has been this enormous, enormous power shift in South and Central America towards the little guy, so to speak, towards national. Believe it or not, it's for nationalism. Venezuelans for Venezuela, Colombians for Colombia. they're very much for trade unions to be able to fight back against big business. It's a very odd thing. They're evangelical Christians, very, very devout. Protestant evangelical Christians, whereas the right wing down there is very, very devout Catholics. But either way, they're far more Christian than North America. But in this particular case, having oil only 1 day's journey by tanker, which about 2,000, if I'm guessing, about 2,000 miles from Caracas to, I guess we could measure. Hold on. Let's see, from Caracas, head to here, head up here. Looks like, 2,120 miles, something like that. So I'm guessing that's about a day, 24 hours. Can a tanker do 20 knots? I think, we learned in the Fitzgerald thing that a tanker can do 20 knots. So anyway, I just wanted to cover this because there's so much information talking about it. And once again, there's a lot of folks out there who are confused about Army psychological operations or military psychological operations. You have to convey the information in a way that you're not outed as attempting to manipulate. You cannot be outed as attempting to manipulate. You just have to put certain information out in a certain way and withhold other information, kind of like lie of omission type of things. And you have to do it in a very subtle way. PSYOPs cannot be something that is identified, because then they're useless. Then the whole game is up. You have to be very, very subtle. And that's why we talk about over at the Florida Maquis Patreon channel, the 24 cognitive biases, the 24 logical fallacies, all of the different things, ethos, pathos, and logos, all of the different ways of getting into somebody's head. For $1 a month, it'll be the best money you ever spend. Ask anybody down in the comments section who's a member. Believe me, and trust me on this one. This issue on, I know people like, what does football have to do with it? There was so much PSYOP going on that night, Monday night, when the young man collapsed on the field, in the ensuing coverage, that it was almost, you had to, literally just get a piece of paper and pad and start writing down what was going on. And it's still going on to this day. Now, good news is the man is, Hamlin is his last name. Number 3 right here, right after he made the tackle, he collapsed. Everybody's worried. They postponed the game and everybody flipped out about it. He's awake and he's been holding hands with family and he's lucid. And they just had a briefing with the hospital. And I heard something to the effect of that he's neurologically intact. So, it looks like he's probably going to have a long road back to football if he ever gets back to football. But he's okay, generally speaking. But how the announcers reacted and everything that was done on the field that night is a case study in psychological operations. So would love to have you there. But I just had to cover this because we covered this story for so long. And everybody told me I was full of it, that this was going to be the new president. I might as well get used to it. And, and Maduro's just going to collapse. And never happened. It never happened. And nobody asks themselves why. It has to do with an entire blind spot that Washington, D.C. has when it comes to everybody south of our border. It's a completely misunderstood story. So I will leave it there. So God bless, like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.